Hi. Hi there. I'm Carolyn Swiszcz. Thank you so much for coming to my artist talk and zine reading. I'm just going to wait another minute or so as people log on and get settled. I really want to acknowledge the Minnesota State Arts Board. So the project that I did and this talk are sponsored or made possible by the Arts Board. So I'm a fiscal year 2020 recipient of an Artist Initiative Grant from the Minnesota State Arts Board. This activity is made possible by the voters of Minnesota through a grant from the Minnesota State Arts Board, thanks to a legislative appropriation from the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. So I will be talking about the 3 zines that I made with my Arts Board grant. But before I get into that, I wanted to give you a little bit of background about me and how I started making zines. So if you'll bear with me for a second here, I'm going to share my screen. So I was born and raised in New Bedford, Massachusetts, and I started making art at a very young age. This is one of my drawings. It's actually a panoramic drawing, and it's my walk to school. As you can see, my work hasn't changed too much in that amount of time. I came to Minnesota at age 18. That's me in the middle there with my parents on either side. The guy on the left is my oldest brother, and he was living in Minnesota. I wanted kind of a safe adventure, and so I came out here where I at least knew someone. I went to the Minneapolis College of Art and Design, and I studied a lot of things, but my main focus was printmaking. And this is one of my first printmaking projects. This is a book of linoleum prints about a hurricane. I think it was Hurricane Bob in the late 80s in New Bedford. My work at MCAD and in the years after school, after college, was very narrative. I had a lot of things about my family and my friends, especially my dad. And I would make these elaborate artist books. They were really time consuming to make. I mean, they were essentially like suites of etchings. You can see here, this one was about my Uncle Charlie. He served in World War II and he was killed in Italy. And this is a drawing of an etching made from a photo where he received the Silver Star posthumously. And another book about my Uncle Stanley. So, I mean, I like these works, but I kind of, sometimes I wish I could go back in time and just tell myself, like, make zines. You could distribute them and maybe work a little faster through these ideas. So I ended up kind of feeling a little stymied by that situation. Like, how do I show these books? Where do I show these books? How do they fit in with fine art? If I wanted to find a publisher, how would I even begin doing that? I started experimenting with making some paintings that were not narrative based. And I started to get a lot of opportunities from that. So I went with that flow for over a decade. And these paintings, you can see they have a lot of printmaking elements to them. So I didn't quite leave my printmaking past behind. So most of you, if you know my work, you might be more familiar with this side of what I do. Our daughter was born in 2007, so here we are. This is a painting of the Met Brewer, or the Whitney. And of course, having a child completely changes a person's outlook. One of my favorite things about being a parent, one of the things that I enjoyed most, and still enjoy, is sharing books with our daughter. And I could just remember like laying in bed and having the book in front of me and really being immersed in this book world, and visiting the kids section of the library where I hadn't been in decades, and reading a book several times to just have that experience over and over, and to know it so well and know all our favorite jokes and details. I have to admit, so the paintings at this point I'd gone down this cul-de-sac where the paintings, I was mostly making them about certain things. And if I had something I wanted to express that was maybe more personal or more about family life or marriage or something a little bit more heartfelt, I just couldn't figure out with my current painting vocabulary how to express those things. And this is something I'm still trying to work through. So I started making other things like videos, animations, and then I started making zines. In 2016, I taught an after-school class for my daughter's elementary school, and I had about 5 kids, and I wanted to do a book arts related project. So I remembered I needed a simple idea. So I remembered this book that was made by my friend Michelle Weinberg. And this form is very popular. It's an 8-page book, but it's made on one sheet of paper. So it's so easy to reproduce this and share it. And it's simple and it's very satisfying. So the kids and I made these books, and here's some examples of the books we made. I especially love this one. 100 kids is a lot. It's got this really weird humor to it. So we also made little storage containers to keep our collections in. So the kids, everybody made 10 zines, and then we traded. So this was this little form of book, this 8-page book, was very it energized me. It was just the right amount of space for the ideas that I had at the time. And then there was also a honeymoon aspect to it. When you come back to something you haven't done in a while, or you try a new medium, there's always this period where you're just playing and you're having fun and you don't have an agenda. And so the work just seems to flow effortlessly. And you haven't hit that wall of not knowing what you don't know yet. And so I ended up just finding a lot of joy in this practice. And after the 2016 election, this was a way for me to have little things that I could control and send in the mail and send to friends, and have these little moments of joy. So it kept me going. I have about 200 subscribers, and I'm still doing this zine mailing thing. So on to these West St. Paul zines. West St. Paul is a suburb of St. Paul. It's about population 20,000 or so. It's south of downtown St. Paul on the Mississippi River. And you might have learned that if you saw my video that I made. I made a song and my husband made this video. And I'm kind of a local celebrity for this video, West St. Paul. To me, in my paintings and in my zines, art is a way to transform daily life into something that's more interesting. So that I do that in 2 ways. So one way is to actually research and uncover facts about the land where we live and the city and the history. The other is, in the process of making a painting or making a video, there's something that brings, say, a pizza place or a donut place or the dry cleaners. Suddenly, if I make a painting or a zine about one of those things, it becomes part of my story as well. And so it activates it for me, and it just makes things that aren't perhaps that interesting, it makes them more interesting to me. Just like Signal Hills Mall. So this is Signal Hills Shopping Center, and you can see on the right-hand side there's an old Kmart that is now closed. And before I moved here, I learned that there was an enclosed mall portion of this place, and I've always just been really intrigued about this mall and what did it look like and what stores were in there. And it was a fairly early mall in the United States. So it has a little bit of a history to it. So I will now read to you Signal Hills Shopping Center. Ever since we moved to West St. Paul, I've had a fondness for Signal Hills Shopping Center. The gulls and decrepitude remind me of where I grew up in Massachusetts. The despair I feel here is oddly pleasant. The south side of the property has a strip of occupied storefronts, but the rest is a giant parking lot and a closed Kmart. And that's my post office on the left there. There's also an old bunker-like bank building decked out with misguided enhancements meant to attract a renter. Right here, where people are practicing parking an RV, there used to be an enclosed mall. The mall had a record store where Grant Hart met Greg Norton in 1978. They later teamed with Bob Mould to form the legendary band Husker Du. So I'm still really intrigued by the idea that this mall existed, and I can't find any pictures on the web or at the Dakota County Historical Society of the interior of this mall. So it was there for decades. Now it's gone, and it's like it never even was there at all. So I've really relied on people who grew up here to tell me more. And one of those people is Stephen Lang. Hi, Stephen, if you're watching. So Stephen was kind enough, he grew up in West St. Paul, and he drew this map. So here's the left side of the map. This is his key to all the stores that were there from the late 70s to the late 80s. And here's his map. He's careful to note that it's not to scale in space or time. So the horizontal section there at the top, that still exists. That's what you saw in the photo, but it's the part that juts out. That was the enclosed section. I like his note here that on the upper right, there was a weird wooded hill where a fugitive was once found. So that's a story to pursue for maybe another zine. What if we met at the Signal Hills parking lot and drew the old mall boundaries with chalk? The dress department was here. I think there was a bench here. The guy on the left, he has the big plan. He's overseeing it. He says, looks good. The lines and stories could stay until the next rain, and then we try to come up with some better ideas for the future. Is this where Chess King was? I got busted for shoplifting over here. This is where he broke my heart. And I ended this part of the zine with sort of a musing about, like, could future developments somehow take into consideration the Husker Du history here? And of course, Zen Arcade is a name of one of their albums. The zine also has 4 pages of history that I'm not going to read all these pages right now because it will be time consuming. But I started to work on this because there were plans to, well, there are plans. So there were plans proposed to make an apartment building on the Signal Hills Mall land. They stalled out for a while. They are back on now, but that was my interest in the project. So I was working on this in April and May, and the pandemic was going, and I kept thinking, like, I'm not good at making like relevant, socially aware, political work. So I kept thinking, like, this mall, this pandemic going on. I'm making this thing about this dumb mall. It doesn't have any relevance to what's happening. And then, of course, on May 25th, George Floyd was killed in police custody. And all of a sudden, just like everything else, the project, it kind of got sucked into this vortex of systematic racism and our examining of our culture. So the mall had some damage to it, but a lot of the stores put up plywood. The National Guard was there a couple nights, and just adjacent to the mall on Butler, there was a small protest. So I think 2020 is the year where, like, you almost can't avoid being relevant, or it's just part of everything. It's so switching gears to the next zine. This one, so that one I made, the Signal Hills Mall was in June. That was the June zine. August was this one. So West St. Paul Points of Interest. Of course, with the pandemic, I wasn't traveling, so had to stay close to home. And I was thinking about, there's a Minnesota poet, Monica Ochtrop, and she had this poem about, in her little town of Sleepy Eye, Minnesota, like going out one day as a girl and trying to get lost. And that's how I felt riding my bike around. Like could I find a street that was unfamiliar? Could I find something to reframe my view of this city and find something surprising? So I made a little guidebook. I'm only just gonna read this page. So this was my favorite page from it. This is the outdoor warning siren, and this is on top of a hill in Marthaler Park. Atop what I think is West St. Paul's highest point sits one of 3 of the city's sirens. They are tested at 1 p.m. on the first Wednesday of the month. I was up there for the most recent test and measured 110 decibels on a phone noise app. My heart was beating fast, not only from the volume, but a childhood association of this sound with an imminent nuclear attack. So once again, I was trying to can I find something dramatic? Can I have to happen in West St. Paul? And again, dramatic and interesting, it's all a relative term, all relative, but being up on top of that hill in the park on a really hot August day when they test the siren, it was interesting to me. So, and before I start with the final zine, I want to mention 2 other zines that I had made previously where I interviewed West St. Paulites. So one person was Neil. He owns Button Works, which is a store in West St. Paul where he makes little promotional buttons, and he has a photocopier. So I'd go there and make my zine. And then Mara Lee, she is a fitness teacher at the Y. And I met both of these people and wanted to know more about them. And so I interviewed them and made these zines. I really wanted to interview the folks that own Granny Donuts. And that was my intention. They are Yuan To and Shui Bun. And well, here this is me and Ramona at Granny Donuts. So it's kind of a favorite spot for us. So here's the owners, Yuan and Shui. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing their names right, but trying my hardest. They owned Granny Donuts for 34 years. I wasn't able to interview them. The Granny Donuts closed in March from COVID, and I tried to reach them through one of their family members on their Facebook page, but it never happened. So I made this book where I was imagining what would happen if they could be open again. And the book is sort of in the form of a prayer. Let there be donuts. May they be open. May they have the kind I want. May I understand and be understood despite masks and different native languages. So I just want to pause here and talk about how many misunderstandings and miscommunications we have already just in our own family and in our own daily interactions with people with whom we share the same language. And then you add on another layer of different cultures, and then you add masks to that. And it just seems like there's this potential for even more friction out in the world and misunderstanding. And so I was praying for to be able to have patience and to be able to sort of anticipate maybe where misunderstandings could happen, and have them smoothed over. Granny Donuts has a lot of great stuff on their walls, so this is just a couple of the things there. May I appreciate the work that others do. So in the little dining room, there's a window where you could actually see Shua making the donuts through that window. And when she was working, you could see her cutting them out. And Granny Donuts only takes cash. So may I improve someone's day. Dang, I forgot. Let me get it. May I take time to savor the donuts when I get home. Change is coming. May things that no longer serve us fall away. May all that is good and life-giving endure. So Granny Donuts was in the center of another West St. Paul development project. For a while, it looked like Granny Donuts was going to be a part that remained while everything was developed around it, kind of like the movie Up. Unfortunately, the owners decided to sell and move on, and you can't blame them after 34 years. So I made this before we knew that outcome. I was hoping that maybe they'd hang on. But this was also made right before the election, and I was thinking about change and hoping for change and hoping for the right kind of change so that we can recognize and have wisdom of what needs to go, but hold on to things that are working. So I'm gonna turn off the screen share. I have just one other little comment. Okay, I'm back. So the Granny Donuts zine, I want to talk a little bit about process here. So I wasn't able to interview the owners, but I did have this little informational part tucked in the middle of that zine. And for most of my zines, I'll do drawings, just pen on paper, and then I scan them into the computer, and they're heavily edited in Photoshop or on an iPad with Procreate. I got really into my painting this summer though. And so when I did the donut zine, I have this thing where I've got the paintings and then I've got the zines, and I don't know if the paintings should have more of the topics of the zines, or if the zine should have more of the techniques of how I make the paintings and not have them be these two separate tracks. So I was trying to experiment with that a little bit. So this is the original artwork from the Granny Donuts zine. And thanks to the grant, I was able to do a full color zine for the first time. So I was able to, I didn't do any editing in the computer. It was all analog, all collage, all paint. So thank you so much for listening to my talk and listening to my reading. I haven't done public speaking in a while, so this was a good exercise. So I have to admit, I did not read up and learn and become comfortable with the Q&A tool on here, but I can use the chat. So if you have a question for me, I'm looking at the chat now, and go ahead and ask me a question if you like, and I'll try my best to answer it. So I'll give people, aha, okay. Yes, so Kelly W says she loves the Granny Donut zine and hopes more comes from that experimenting. So I'm working on a longer, possibly a book in 2021, and I do want to bring back some more of that earlier painting and narrative style and have the whole thing be full color. So yes, I'm trying to merge those things a little bit more. Yes, that's the plan. I did record this. It says recording, so I hope to be able to share this with you. So that was, okay, so that was Stephen. Yes, and thanks, Mary. And there any other questions or comments? Do I have a favorite zine? Ooh, it's usually not the one I just finished. Sometimes it's usually when I finish it, I just hate it. Like I've been looking at it and folding it and putting it in envelopes, and I see everything that's wrong with it. So it's usually not the one I just finished. Sometimes it's the one from a year before. Let's see, my favorite zine from this year. I'm really happy with how the Granny Donuts one came out. So I have to say that's probably one of my favorites right now. Let's see. My writing process. There's lots, and what is my writing process like is the question. I go through a lot of drafts, and so just pencil mock-ups. I have to say that I'm really grateful to my family. So my husband reads them a lot, and his mom and her wife read them. And I look for reactions. I look to see if, and my friend Patty too, I look to see what their reactions are and to see if I'm being clear enough. So I always worry that I'm not making sense or my ideas aren't coming through. So a lot of what's developed, or I hope I've been able to develop in the past decade, is not being defensive when there's a question or a criticism, and looking at that of, oh, this criticism is a tool that I can take or not take, and continue forward. So yeah, there's a lot of editing and really playing. It's a lot of fussing with each. They're kind of in the realm of poetry, where each little word is very carefully considered. So let's see. Peter says, I'm inspired by your spirit and have been for years. Can you talk about your motivation? Definitely, it's, as I mentioned, it's trying to, sometimes daily life doesn't seem like it's exciting enough. And somehow, growing up Catholic, it's that wanting to have a layer of ritual or magic over things. And that's what art making is a little bit for me. It's, I have to say, I feel like the world is real plain and opaque for me. And I don't see a lot of but I have to create that magic to give it meaning, I guess. That's my motivation. Let's see. Oh, yeah, thank you. Oh, I love that. I love Krista's story about the shoe repair. So yes, I had to follow up with that. And so thank you, Jody. So Andy says, how many states? I can't remember how many I have actual subscribers in, but when I did that Marilee zine, I wanted to get it to all 50 states. So I put a call out on Instagram, and I gave them out free. Like if they had, and I think, and I've sent some to Australia. I've sent some, I'm trying to think of the furthest away that I've sent some zines. So yeah, they're in all 50 states, even if they're not current subscribers. Let's see. Yes, that was that. Okay. So I did do Well, I did a JT's painting once. I don't have a zine of it, but I did a painting of that one. And thanks, David and Liz. Yes, and I do want to edit a zine after one of the questions is, do you ever want to edit a zine after you've mailed them out? And yes, and I have to give sometimes in order to finish these on time, I have to tell myself they're just a draft. They can be changed. And my idea is if in the future I want to make a book that's a compendium, a compilation of all of them, then I can change them and edit them and improve them if I need to. But you kind of have to make these little rules with yourself in order to get work done sometimes. And that's one thing that's a trick I use a lot. Like it's not the final one. Let's see. So thank you, and thanks for the great comments, Lisa and Deborah. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you turning on your computers and joining me, and I wish you a super happy new year. And if you ever want to subscribe, if you're not a subscriber or you want to get subscriptions, if you find me on Etsy, just type my last name in there, it comes up. So I should put in that plug there too. So thank you and good night and happy new year. Oh, sorry. Thank you.